Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. In this week's video, we're starting a brand new series entitled Complex Medical Decision Making and the QME. And this program is being developed by popular request. And by that I mean that what we're going to be discussing in this program has to do with the difficult medical decision making choke points that you encounter in the completion of your final product, which is your QME report. And if you're anything like me, you'll realize and recognize that there are choke points along the pathway to the completion of your QME report. You'll be sitting there working on your QME report, and you'll stumble upon a difficult issue that causes you to have to put on your thinking cap and sustain concentration for a period of time in order to resolve the issue and move forward with the remainder of your report. And what we're going to discuss in this program has to do with those medical decision-making areas that qualified medical evaluators have the greatest difficulty, have the hardest time in coming up with a solid opinion and conclusion that effectively resolves the disputed issue in their particular case. Now, if you're anything like me, and if you're anything like all other qualified medical evaluators, you have a typical pattern and a typical practice of handling these difficult medical decision-making choke points. Typically, when a qualified medical evaluator comes upon an area, particularly an area of their weakness, an area where they have limited knowledge, where they have limited experience, where they have limited background in actually opining and resolving the difficult issue involved with their particular case, qualified medical evaluators typically handle these choke points in a templated, pre-orchestrated fashion, and that is they defer. They defer the issue. They find ways, they find reasons, and they find methods to defer the issue and to defer their medical decision making until a later time. So typically when a qualified medical evaluator stumbles upon a choke point, they will resolve the matter, at least momentarily or temporarily, by declaring the examinee to be not permanent and stationary, and thereby recommending a long series of procedures, tests, and medical treatment to allow the qualified medical evaluator time to get his head and wrap his or her head around the disputed issue, such that when the examinee comes back for a reevaluation, perhaps 6, 9 months, 12 months later, by then the qualified medical evaluator will have done the necessary research, will have consulted with the colleagues to discuss the issue, and will have educated him or herself on the issue so that now, 6 months later, 9 months later, 12 months later, the issue can actually finally be resolved once and for all. Well, this introduces unnecessary delays into the system, and this is not the preferred method of handling these cases. The reason these cases come to us is for a resolution of the disputed issues. And so we're going to talk in this program about how to immediately, at the time that you're called upon to provide an evaluation for the examinee, we're going to talk about how to resolve the disputed issues then and there without deferring the issue until such later time as A, B, C, D, and fill in the blank procedures are completed. Okay? And the difficult issues that qualified medical evaluators seem to have the most trouble fall into 3 basic categories. It has to do with the AOE, COE, causation determination, has to do with the permanent impairment determination, and has to do, of course, with the apportionment approximate percentages in those cases where the examinee is left with some permanent impairment. So these are the difficult issues that we face as qualified medical evaluators. It's not a difficult issue in other sections of your report where you're simply reporting objective information, such as the examinee's history, such as the examinee's range of motion findings, such as the examinee's findings on diagnostic studies. Those are sections of the report that are easy. But there are sections in the report where the rubber meets the road, and we're calling upon you as the qualified medical evaluator to put on your thinking cap and exert some sustained concentration to come up with an opinion or conclusion that's a substantial opinion or conclusion that actually resolves the disputed issue, and it's an opinion or conclusion that the parties can rely on in the resolution of the disputed issue. So typically this has to do with the AOE COE determination, whether you as the qualified medical evaluator are going to provide an opinion to either accept the case as an industrial injury or to deny the presence of an industrial injury. And this is a very, very difficult determination that has to be correct every single time. It has to be correct. It's such a high stakes issue that it has to be correct every single time. You never ever want to make a mistake on the AOE COE determination, and so it's very, very difficult, it's very complex, and this is an area where some basic tools and algorithms will help you as the qualified medical evaluator to provide an opinion on AOE COE that's always 100% of the time the correct opinion or conclusion for your case. In those cases where the case does become accepted and the examinee goes through medical treatment and has been declared permanent and stationary, we're going to talk about how to provide the absolutely accurate permanent impairment rating for your particular examinee. And if you've been doing this for any length of time, you'll know that when it comes time to providing for a permanent impairment opinion for your examinee, a permanent impairment rating for your examinee, many times your examinee could have 2, 3, 4, 5, or even more possible options for describing their permanent impairment. How do you decide on which one is the most accurate description of the examinee's true condition? How do you know whether it's appropriate to use an impairment rating under the strict application of the AMA guides compared to an alternative impairment rating under Alvarez-Guzman? We'll talk about that. How do you know when the most accurate permanent impairment rating is based upon adding the permanent impairments for multiple body parts compared to combining those impairments for multiple body parts? How do you know whether it's more appropriate to add versus combine the impairment ratings? How do you know when it's appropriate and accurate to provide for an additional impairment rating due to the examinee's pain that creates an added burden above and beyond the standard permanent impairment rating? How do you know? We're going to talk about exactly how to know and how to provide impairment ratings that are exactly accurate for the examinee's condition. And then finally, the most difficult area for qualified medical evaluators across the board, across all specialties, up and down the entire state of California, has to do with the apportionment approximate percentages. And I get calls from qualified medical evaluators all the time, and they ask me, Perry, how do you do it? How do you come up with apportionment approximate percentages? How do you know what percent of the permanent impairment is due to the industrial injury and what percent of the permanent impairment is due to other factors? I mean, how do you know? How do you know if it's 90-10 or 80-20 or 70-30 or some other combination of percentages? How do you know? How can you know? Is it possible to know? Well, I'm here to tell you that it is possible to come up with apportionment approximate percentages that are exactly accurate. They're the exact, perfect apportionment approximate percentages to fit your particular case. There's an exact science for determining the apportionment approximate percentages, and that, among these other difficult issues, is what we want to talk about in this particular program. So let's explore these topics a little bit before we get into today's discussion on AOE and COE. Okay, so let's establish our objectives for this particular program. Our overriding purpose for this program is to help you as a qualified medical evaluator to improve your medical decision making in those determinations that require you to put on your thinking cap and to bear down and provide the parties with a resolution to the disputed issue. And so we're after constant and never-ending improvement as qualified medical evaluators. Not sure how many of you are familiar with this acronym. Was coined by Tony Robbins, and it stands for constant and never-ending improvement as a qualified medical evaluator. And this program is to help you improve your medical decision making so that you can become a more competent qualified medical evaluator. In order to increase your competence, we want to provide to you some tools that you can rely on when it gets down to the difficult medical decision making choke points, down in the trenches where you're all alone, charged with the responsibility of providing a QME report to the parties. So we want to provide you some tools that help make you more competent in resolving disputed issues. As you become more and more competent at resolving disputed issues, you're going to become more and more confident in your case handling and more confident in your own and the certainty of your own medical decision making and in the certainty of your own opinions and conclusions that they are exactly the accurate opinions and conclusions for your particular case. As you become more competent and more confident in the work that you do, you're going to become a more valuable QME in the system. And the system sorely and badly needs valuable, competent, and confident qualified medical evaluators. As you may or may not know, many qualified medical evaluators are leaving the system, and in my opinion, that has in large part to do with lack of competence to be able to quickly and effectively handle these cases that we get. You know, many qualified medical evaluators take a full 29 days, or even now when we're graced with some extension period of up to additional 15 days, many qualified medical evaluators take the entirety of the time period, whether it be 29 days or 45 days, to produce their QME report, thus introducing 30 days or 45 days of delay in the resolution of the issue at dispute in their QME case. We need qualified medical evaluators that are more competent, that can quickly and accurately pump out these reports so that the system can keep moving forward without the introduction of unnecessary and costly delays that typical qualified medical evaluators are accustomed to introducing into the system due to lack of competence to be able to accurately resolve the disputed issues. QMEs have a variety of procedures that they employ to defer, and to take that particular choke point in their QME evaluation, to take that choke point where they're stuck and to put it behind their back where they can neglect to confront it until the 29th day or even the 44th day. And we want to accelerate the system by helping you become much more competent and much more confident in your medical decision making. So to that end, let's define our topics in this particular program. And in this particular program, we want to deal with AOE, COE, industrial causation issues for the most difficult AOE, COE problem faced by qualified medical evaluators, and that has to do with the denied post-employment cumulative trauma claim. Now, many qualified medical evaluators, when they get a QME appointment request, have no knowledge, have no interest, and have no method for determining the nature of the case. And this is a particular species of case, the post-employment cumulative trauma claim, that you're going to be seeing over and over again in your career as a qualified medical evaluator, particularly in Southern California, where this particular species of claim is rampant. Okay, so What's important for you as a qualified medical evaluator is to, number one, be able to identify this particular species of claim when you get it. Okay, of all the claims that you, of all the cases that you get, a certain percentage of them are going to be this particular issue. It's going to involve this particular dispute, an AOE COE dispute for a post-employment cumulative trauma injury claim. And these cases have a very, very specific handling, and qualified medical evaluators seem to have tremendous difficulty in providing an accurate opinion or conclusion on AOE COE in this particular species of claim. So we're going to talk about this particular species of claim in great depth, because you're going to be seeing a ton of these if you haven't already seen a ton of these in your career as a qualified medical evaluator. Okay? Then we're going to talk about the permanent impairment rating that you're providing for your examinees. And I'll tell you an insider secret having to do with examinees who are permanent and stationary and who get a permanent impairment rating. And that secret has to do with the accuracy of your permanent impairment rating. Now, the secret is that all of the parties involved with the resolution of the claim, that means the claims administrator, the applicant attorney, the defense attorney, in those cases where the examinees represented, the workers' compensation judge, all the parties involved in the resolution of the claim are concerned with the accuracy of the rating. Accuracy is prime, accuracy is paramount, and your job as the qualified medical evaluator is to provide the parties with a permanent impairment rating that's accurate. If it's not accurate, it won't be correct. It won't be naturally right, and one or more of the parties is going to object to that permanent impairment rating. None of the parties have any objection. This is the secret. None of the parties have any objection to your permanent impairment rating when your permanent impairment rating is accurate. When it's an accurate description of the examinee's true condition, whether that condition be a mild condition, a moderate condition, a severe condition, it's critical that your permanent impairment rating be accurate. Otherwise, it won't be swallowed by all of the parties. One or more of the parties is going to choke it back, spit it back at you, and have you readdress it. Okay? So accuracy in the permanent impairment ratings is a key job for the qualified medical evaluator, and we'll talk about exactly how to do that. And then again, as we discussed, we're going to talk about the apportionment approximate percentages. And no longer are you going to hate, for lack of a better word, no longer are you going to hate the apportionment approximate percentages or providing for your apportionment determination. This is going to be a section of your report that you're going to actually look forward to. You're going to look forward to providing an opinion on the apportionment approximate percentages that's the naturally right approximate percentages based upon the facts of the case. And we're going to talk about how to determine the facts that are relevant in your apportionment determination. There are certain key facts that drive the apportionment determination, and that's what makes determining the apportionment approximate percentages an exact science. And there's an exact system for determining the facts and allowing the facts to drive the apportionment approximate percentages. So I have a fascinating program for you today. It's going to help you tremendously in these difficult areas that are basically, these are the money and the financial drivers of the case. The causation determination in a denied case is everything. The causation determination is what determines whether the claims payer opens the checkbook and provides benefits for the examinee or closes the checkbook and denies benefits to the examinee. It's so critical because this is a dispute that involves the inception of the claim. You'll notice these other two disputed issues that frequently come to us, these are disputes that come to us at the end of the claim. But the AOE COE determination comes to us at the inception of the claim. So this is a critical determination that you have to get right every single time. And then permanent impairment is a financial driver of the case. Apportionment approximate percentages, of course, is a financial driver of the case. And the defense and the claims payer are going to seek the highest possible apportionment determination due to other factors. And the applicant attorney, of course, is going to seek the highest possible apportionment percentage due to the industrial injury. And I'm going to share with you some ideas as to how to get it exactly right. Okay? So with that as our introduction, let's begin today's program entitled Complex Medical Decision Making and the QME. And let's begin by talking about industrial causation, AOE, COE. And let's talk about how it is that these cases come to you for a determination on AOE, COE. Let's go through the exact sequence of events that happens behind the scenes that you as the qualified medical evaluator have no knowledge of at that point in time when your phone rings for an appointment for an AOE, COE determination. So this is going to be our syllabus for this section of the program relating to industrial causation, AOE, COE. And we want to first talk about what goes on behind the scenes long before you get a phone call for a QME evaluation. We're going to talk about the process whereby the parties request a qualified medical evaluation in these particular types of cases. And remember, we're talking about the very specific species of case that has to do with the cumulative trauma claim, the alleged cumulative trauma injury that's filed post-employment, meaning after the employee has separated from the employer, for which the claims administrator has denied the claim. So that's a mouthful, and there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes long before you ever get a call for the qualified medical evaluation. So we'll talk about how the QME appointment with you is requested, and then we're going to back up even further from there, and we're going to talk about why it is that a qualified medical evaluation with you is necessary, and why it is typically that these cases come to be either denied or disputed by the claims administrator. And that begins with an understanding of Labor Code 5402, which is the $10,000 rule. Labor Code 5402, as we're going to see, is going to lead into Labor Code 4660, which is the compensability exam, which you as the qualified medical evaluator are getting. You're being charged with rendering an exam or an evaluation to resolve the compensability issue. And it's critical that you recognize this when the case and the phone call comes in to you. It's critical that you recognize in advance the scope of your evaluation and the issue that's in dispute with your evaluation. If you can determine the issue that's in dispute with your particular evaluation, it'll guide you accurately and perfectly down the proper pathway to resolve that disputed issue. And that proper pathway is part of the strategy and the philosophy of this discussion. We want to help you get to the proper pathway that will allow you to quickly and accurately resolve these otherwise difficult determinations. And then in our second session in this AOE COE discussion, we're going to talk about how to actually render the proper opinion and conclusion and how to fashion your argument within the body of your report. And that begins by understanding who carries the burden of proof in establishing an industrial injury. This is a critical concept for you to be able to understand that will help you tremendously when it comes time to provide an opinion in an area which sometimes can be gray areas within our medical decision-making brain. It's very, very difficult to come up with these determinations because there are so many gray areas. Well, here's going to be how you resolve those gray areas, and it has to do with understanding where the burden of proof lies in these disputed cases. Then we're going to talk about the problem with fraud in compensation claims, and particularly in workers' compensation claims. And I have some references from the AMA guides. I have some references from a recently published RAND study. It's published in 2017, but is still valid and valuable for our understanding even today. And then we're going to talk about an important concept that has to do not with malingering, but it has to do with something that you're going to see much more common in your evaluation. And it has to do with what's referred to as false imputation, which you're going to see in your examinees all the time. And then finally, we're going to talk about examinee credibility. And you're going to find that your examinee's credibility is going to be critical in rendering your opinion or conclusion. And some examinees will be very credible because they're simply reporting to you what actually happened. They're simply telling you the truth. And there'll be other examinees whose credibility is not so strong. And I'm going to share with you several tools that you have available both before the face-to-face evaluation and then also at the face-to-face evaluation to help you assess your examinee's credibility and to help you arrive at an accurate opinion on AOE COE. And then we're going to put it all together and I'm going to share with you an algorithm that you can use in each and every case where compensability is the disputed issue. You simply run your particular facts, your particular scenario through the causation algorithm, and at the bottom of the algorithm out pops the perfectly accurate determination every single time. So I can't wait to share that with you at the conclusion of this particular section of this new program. Okay? So let's talk about what goes on behind the scenes and how it is that the parties come to request a QME evaluation with you. And this has to do with some forms that we as qualified medical evaluators never see, but it's my opinion that it's important for you to actually see these forms in each and every case that you evaluate. So let's talk about QMEs Form 105 and QME Forms 106. Okay, so behind the scenes, long before you get a call for a qualified medical evaluation, the parties have to fill out some paperwork to provide the Division of Workers' Compensation Medical Unit with a request for a panel qualified medical evaluation. Now, for unrepresented employees, the form that is used to request a qualified medical evaluation is QME Form 105. And here is QME Form 105. So this is going to be filled out by an injured worker or by the claims administrator. And notice here that it has some instructions to complete this form, to mail it to the medical unit, etc. Now, of interest to us for this particular discussion on AOE COE has to do here with the reason for scheduling the panel QME. Now, because this is many times filled out by injured employees, lay people that aren't familiar with workers' compensation, the reasons are outlined here in lay terms. Now, as we're going to see for represented injured workers, where this form is filled out by knowledgeable persons such as applicant attorneys, such as defense attorneys, this terminology that's described here is simply indicated through the use of a labor code. But each one of these reasons here on this form is spelled out in longhand for the lay person to be able to understand. So let's go through these reasons. Reason number one is to determine if the injury is work-related and whether or not the claim should be compensable. So this is the box that's going to be checked in those cases that are denied cases, particularly in the post-employment cumulative trauma denied or disputed case. The injured worker is going to check this box to establish the dispute. This is the dispute. The dispute is between the claims payer, who's claiming that there is no injury, there is no work-related injury, and the injured employee who's claiming that there is a work-related injury. This is the dispute. Now, other disputes involve an objection to the primary treating physician's determination regarding temporary disability, permanent disability, or the need for future medical care. This is a different type of dispute. This is a dispute that comes at the end of the claim, whereas the compensability dispute here comes at the beginning of the claim. There are other disputes as well, and those boxes are checked here and information is provided here. For our purposes as qualified medical evaluators, it's critical for us to determine if the case involves a compensability dispute. If the case, the issue in dispute is AOE, COE, and we will know that, and I'll give you certain key facts about the case that will help you determine if this is indeed the case. Now, it would be great if we received a copy of QME Form 105 with the materials and the request for the QME appointment, but we don't. But it's important that we understand that there are a finite list of objections that call for your determination. And one of the most important, one of the most frequent, is this one here, which has to do with your determination as to whether or not the injury is work-related. So this is QME Form 105 for unrepresented injured workers. For represented injured workers use QME Form 106, which is all done entirely online now. So let's take a look at QME Form 106. Again, this is usually going to be filled out by one or more of the parties, such as the applicant attorney, such as the defense attorney. And notice there's all these steps across the top of the form. There's the panel request, there's information about the employee, and all of this has to be filled in before the review and submit button can be clicked over here. So for our purposes, notice that in requesting a panel qualified medical evaluation with you, the parties have to indicate which labor code section it is that's calling for the need for the qualified medical evaluation. Now on QME Form 105, as we said, the reason for the panel request is spelled out in lay terms, but each one of these is driven by a particular labor code. The labor code isn't included here because injured workers don't understand labor codes. But for represented injured workers, the terminology is left out and only the labor code section is provided here as a selection option. So in the disputed post-employment cumulative trauma claim, the requesting party is going to choose labor code 4060, and the form auto-populates itself and tells us that the dispute type has to do with the compensability dispute. Now, it would be great if the parties told you in every single case that the issue that's driving the need for your evaluation is compensability, but they don't. But there are several cues and several clues that you can investigate that will help you confirm that indeed the disputed issue has to do with compensability. Okay? So this is how the parties come to request the qualified medical evaluation from you. But let's take a step back even from there, and let's take a look at the issues that happen even before the request for a panel, the issues that cause the need for a panel appointment with you, that cause the dispute in the first place. And that has to do with Labor Code 5402. So let's take a look at Labor Code 5402. Okay, so let's go behind the scenes and determine some of the sequence of events that happen even before the need for a qualified medical evaluation with you arises. And this has to do with Labor Code 5402. And Labor Code 5402 governs the procedures that take place when a claim for an industrial injury first hits the claims administrator's desk. 5402 is affectionately known in the business as the $10,000 rule. So let's go through quickly Labor Code 5402. Okay, so Section A tells us that knowledge of an injury knowledge of an injury, knowledge meaning on the part of the claims payer, which can be obtained from any source on the part of an employer, on the part of an employer's managing agent, on the part of a supervisor, on the part of a foreman, or any other person in authority at the employer, at the place of employment, or knowledge of the assertion of a claim. Knowledge of the assertion of the claim. This can be like through hearsay, through gossip, through scuttlebutt, through the grapevine. Knowledge of even the assertion of a claim is sufficient, or knowledge of the assertion of a claim of injury which is sufficient to afford opportunity of the employer to make an investigation into the facts, qualifies as notice or service of the claim for industrial injury. So this section, 5402A, is a softening of the reporting requirements that are described more formally and more forcefully under Labor Code Section 5400. And let me just read to you Labor Code Section 5400 right now. And this has to do with how a claim for an industrial injury needs to be reported by the person alleging the claim. So it says, except as provided by Section 5402, which is this section right here. This is the exception. This is the exception to 5400. It says, except as provided by 5402 here, no claim to recover compensation under this division shall be maintained unless within 30 days, there's a 30-day statute to file a claim for industrial injury. Unless within 30 days after the occurrence of the injury, which is claimed to have caused the disability or death, there is served upon the employer notice in writing. Notice in writing. So a notice in writing has to be provided by the employee to the employer within 30 days of the date of the alleged injury. Signed by the person injured or someone in his behalf, or in the case of the death of the person injured, by a dependent or someone in the dependent's behalf. So the reporting requirement for an industrial injury is actually quite rigid. It requires a written report within 30 days signed by the injured employee, except for this softening which is provided under 5402, which states that simply the knowledge or even the knowledge of the assertion of a claim is sufficient to service under Section 5400. It's the same, qualifies as the same strength of reporting. So with these claims, in order to satisfy Labor Code 5402, examinees will tell you that they reported the injury to their superintendent, that they reported the injury to the foreman, that they reported the injury to human resources, that they reported it to someone, because they're asserting that the employer had the knowledge of the injury in an effort to satisfy this criteria of Labor Code 5402. So you're going to want to keep your attention tuned and your antenna tuned to the examinee's description as to how they reported or how they provided the knowledge of the injury to the employer. Well, 5402B tells us that if liability for this claim is not rejected within 90 days after the date the claim form is filed, the injury shall be presumed compensable under this division. So the claims administrator has a 90-day period within which to investigate this claim and to decide whether to accept or to deny the claim. So they have a 90-day investigation period. Now, this presumption, if the claims administrator blows the 90-day time period, the claim is presumed compensable, and this presumption of this subdivision can be rebutted but only by evidence which is discovered subsequent to the 90-day period. In other words, if the information was available within the 90-day period, that information cannot be used after the 90-day period to provide a denial to the claim, because that information was available within the 90-day time period. Okay? So you're going to be getting these calls for these evaluations within the 90-day time period as the claims administrator uses your evaluation in an effort to decide whether to accept or to deny the claim. So that's one of the key cues and clues that you're going to assess for when the call comes in for an appointment with you, and that is, what is the date of injury? When you have a very recent date of injury, usually right around the 90-day time period, since the date of injury, you know that what you're dealing with is a compensability dispute. Okay? Now, how is it that these claims come to be denied, and particularly the post-employment cumulative trauma claim? These are claims that are typically immediately denied by the claims administrator. In other words, the claims administrator doesn't even use the 90-day time period to investigate the claim. They, in a knee-jerk reflexive reaction when these claims come in, they simply deny the claim. And why is that? Well, let's talk about that in Section C of Labor Code 5402. Okay, so Labor Code 5402 tells us in Section C that within 1 working day after an employee files a claim form, so if there's no claim form, then this section does not apply. And injured workers will tell you that no, there was no paperwork that was completed. That's the key phrase that you'll hear them say, or you'll read in the medical records. No paperwork was completed, or no claim form was filed. If there's no claim form filed, then the provisions of this section would not apply. Okay? But when a claim form is filed, then within 1 working day, the employer shall authorize the provision of all treatment for all body parts, for every aspect of the injury, even for alleged injury, and shall continue to provide treatment until such date that liability for the claim is accepted or rejected, which we saw from Labor Code 5402 Section B, that the claims payer has up to 90 days to make this determination. So this medical treatment could continue up until the 90th day under this section if the claims payer delays in making that determination. Now, here's the kicker. This is where cases come to us in droves for the compensability evaluation. It tells us in the final sentence that until the date that the claim is accepted or rejected, liability for medical treatment shall be limited to $10,000. Now, this could be perhaps better rephrased by stating that liability for medical treatment shall be provided for up to $10,000. And this is the kicker right here. This is why we get so many cases and requests for compensability evaluation under Labor Code 4060, is because in order to stop the bleeding from the $10,000 in those cases where the claims administrator has received a claim form from an injured worker who's alleging an injury, in order to stop the bleeding from this particular pool of money, which is separate from the pool of money that's allocated towards the claim, this is a separate pocket of money. In order to stop the bleeding from this pocket of money, the claims administrator simply rejects and denies the claim. The claims administrator takes out the denied stamp and denies this claim in order to restrict the opportunity of the alleged injured employee from receiving medical treatment, thereby keeping the reserves of $10,000 within this particular pool of money. And you can see how much of a cost savings this can provide to the claims payer when the claims payer is dealing with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of claims even on a monthly basis. Imagine if thousands of claims are allowed to run up thousands of dollars of medical treatment while the claims payer goes through the arduous and painstaking and lengthy time-consuming process of investigating each and every claim. It would be prohibitive. So in order to control costs, the claims administrator simply brings out the denied stamp and creates a disputed issue over the compensability of the claim, and that's what brings the claim to us as the qualified medical evaluator. So these steps that occur behind the scenes are important for you as a qualified medical evaluator to understand, so that you can understand what it is that you're being called upon to render, what opinion it is you're being called upon to render in these particular cases. And it's important for you to understand how and why it is that you're receiving a large quantity of these cases. These cases that involve the post-employment cumulative trauma claims are coming into claims administrators throughout the state of California in the thousands, monthly, in the thousands, particularly in Southern California. And so when these injured workers fill out a claim form, either at the employer or at their attorney's office, the claims payer is then responsible for medical care up to $10,000. And so in order to prevent leakage and stop bleeding from this particular fund of money, the claims payer has no option but to deny the claim until an opinion is provided by you, the qualified medical evaluator, either providing an opinion for FOR industrial injury or an opinion against industrial injury. And this is how these cases come to us. Now, even in those cases where the injured worker receives some initial treatment under this section of Labor Code 5402, the treatment that's provided under this subdivision shall not give rise to a presumption of liability on the part of the employer. So sometimes you'll see these cases where the examinee has received some treatment, some initial medical treatment, perhaps from the occupational medical clinic, within the employer's medical provider network. In other words, medical care is provided for a limited period of time to allow the parties to ascertain what is the scope, what is the nature of the alleged industrial injury, after which the employer can then make a decision. If it's a clear-cut industrial injury and the primary treating physician under this section, who's rendering treatment under this section, provides an opinion, a clear-cut opinion for industrial injury, then the claims payer can comfortably and confidently move forward with what is otherwise considered a valid claim. If the primary treating physician provides an opinion that's not so clear-cut and that casts some doubt as to the veracity of a bona fide industrial injury, then the claims payer can decide at that point to accept or deny the claim. So sometimes you're going to see cases where there is an initial period of treatment rendered under this section of Labor Code 5402, even though the case is sort of in limbo, neither accepted nor rejected, and under which case it could still come to you for a determination from you as the qualified medical evaluator for a determination on AOE and COE. Okay, so here it is. This is where the preponderance of cases come to us for this particular determination, especially in those cases that involve cumulative trauma that's filed post-employment. Okay, so now you know how these cases are coming to you. They're coming to you from one or more of the parties filling out either QME Form 105 or QME 106. And even before that, a dispute is created when the claims administrator receives a claim form or receives some knowledge, or even the knowledge of the assertion of a claim, that there's an industrial injury. The claims administrator receives knowledge of a claim for industrial injury, And there's a dispute over compensability. There's a dispute over AOE COE. Now you have to ask yourself, what kind of cases would involve a dispute over AOE COE? It's those types of cases that have red flags associated with them that are disputed claims. Bona fide industrial injuries do not get disputed by the claims payer. In incidences of injury that involve witnessed incidences of injury for bona fide injury for which the injury is reported immediately, these are not the types of claims and cases that raise compensability disputes. It's the other population of claims where compensability is in dispute that triggers Labor Code 5402, triggers the payment of up to $10,000 of potential medical treatment that then causes the claims administrator in a knee-jerk reflexive reaction, really like a bear in the woods chewing off his own paw when that paw is caught in a trap. They'll chew off their own paw to save their life. And the claims administrator similarly brings out the denied stamp to stop the bleeding from the $10,000 to give them some time, some free time, free meaning no money required, to investigate the claim. So this is how these claims cause your phone to ring as a qualified medical evaluator. So now that you understand that, how it is that you come to be getting these calls, in our next session we're going to talk about how to resolve the disputed issue, how to determine whether the case is or is not compensable under Labor Code 4060. So topics that we're going to discuss have to do with the burden of proof for establishing an industrial injury, the problem of fraud in workers' compensation, and these are some issues that are necessary for you to understand to help you arrive at your own conclusion on AOE and COE. You know, when it comes right down to it, the AOE COE determination is going to involve some gray area for you. And you'll wish that you had some insider's knowledge as to how to resolve these types of issues where you have to step out on a limb. You have to opine within reasonable medical probability, which is different than medical certainty. Okay, so it's hard to be absolutely correct on these cases. So these are some tools that will help you when you get down in those corn rows and those deep trenches all by yourself and having to come up with the apportionment, with the causation determination. So in order to help you with that, we're going to put it all together into an algorithm that will take you step by step through a series of medical decision-making checkpoints that will help you arrive at the perfectly accurate conclusion every single time. So I look forward to being with you on our next session as we continue our new series entitled Complex Medical Decision Making and the QME, and we're in session part 1 of this program, which has to do with the AOE COE determination. So for now, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on this discussion, and I look forward to being with you on our next discussion as well. For now, I'm wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.